We start every show, every post-game show with our biggest takeaway, and that's our weekly challenge to you guys in the comments section as well. There are dozens of things that you could take out of this football game positive. There are a couple of maybe negatives that you could take out of this football game. The challenge is picking the one that you think is the most singular, the most important. And that's what we're going to do to start the show. What is our number one? We're bad at this because we always like to pick more than one. What is our one biggest singular takeaway from this football game? And our weekly challenge to you guys in the comment section is, after this show is done live, give us your biggest takeaway in the comment section. You can give it to us live as well. Comment on this video with your biggest takeaway from Bills Commanders. And Dave, I'll start with you. What is your biggest takeaway from Bills Commanders?
Yeah, so my biggest takeaway from Bills Commanders is kind of a culmination of what we've seen in the season so far in 3 games. And that to me is, and since we're not doing a one-word answer, that actually helps me here. But my biggest takeaway here is that through 3 games, I think the 2 biggest question marks we've had about this roster going into this season, that being right tackle in Spencer Brown and middle linebacker and whoever that ended up being, in this case, Terrell Bernard, those biggest questions maybe are answered. I don't want to go as far to say as to lock it in, so to speak, but like through 3 weeks, the 2 biggest questions we had surrounding the quality of starting talent on the roster at right tackle and middle linebacker have been answered positively so far through 3 games. Now, I know it's a long season and there's going to be ups and downs, but how can you not look at the performances of Terrell Bernard, highlighted by yesterday's game, and Spencer Brown carrying that momentum over from the week prior against Max Crosby into this game against a very good Washington defensive front, and say to yourself that, hey, the Bills are in good shape if these were the 2 biggest questions, and through 3 games, they've really answered the call.
Yeah, Charles G comes in and says his biggest takeaway is the play of the O-line. We're certainly going to get into that. You just mentioned right tackle Spencer Brown specifically. Zachary Easterwood comes in and says we finally have a legitimate pass rush. That is something that we're going to talk about over the course of the show as well, because we've seen it in spurts. Like, last year to start the season, the pass rush was great, or a couple of seasons ago, here and there, the pass rush was great, but the consistency on top of being extremely good has been there through 3 weeks. So that is definitely something to take away. Steve Noble comes in and says his biggest takeaway is Josh Allen trusting the rest of his team and not doing too much the past 2 weeks. So maybe that first week, despite how tough that L is to take, right? Because that just makes this game against the Dolphins even more stressful, because listen, if we lose to the Dolphins, it's not the end of the world, but it does mean we're 0-2 in the AFC East because we dropped a very winnable game. But if Josh Allen plays like this the rest of the season, because we took that out week 1, I guess maybe that's the blessing in disguise, but I'm just trying to put a positive spin on it here as a Bills fan. Spin 0481 comes in and says the D-line level of play is night and day from previous seasons. How much credit does McDermott deserve for the increased level of play from our D-line? That's what I'm going to get. That's what I'm going to get to. That's my biggest takeaway. My biggest takeaway is Sean McDermott, and I think his play calling is making a huge difference for this football team. They're not blitz happy, right? But what Sean McDermott is doing that I think Leslie Frazier hasn't been doing is he's doing a lot of simulated pressures, right? It's always like 4, sometimes 5 guys blitzing, but you really never know where that blitz is coming from. And he just confused the heck out of Sam Howell this week. I mean, he was just toying with the young quarterback with his simulated pressures. He was using his defensive backs. He was essentially opening a window to start the play, but then quickly closing that window the second Sam Howell made his decision. And he made Sam Howell's life a living hell. 9 sacks, 5 turnovers. Sean McDermott now in his career, 264-66. That is the point differential when facing a quarterback with 5 starts or less. Sean McDermott knows how to take advantage of an inexperienced quarterback in the National Football League. Under Sean McDermott, I believe this defense is playing more downhill. They're playing faster. They're playing more aggressive. Yes, the occasional big play does happen on them now, but the Bills are producing bigger plays themselves, as was evidence from that 9-sack, 5-turnover game. And on the season, the Buffalo Bills defense has only allowed 2 touchdowns in 31 drives, which is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, 2 touchdowns in 31 drives. And like I mentioned before, still the second fewest points allowed in the AFC for a team that is 2-1. You know, Obviously, the Jets game, we hope to look back and see that as an anomaly come the end of the season. But man, that defense is firing. Leonard Floyd, we've been big fans of his signing since
Mhm.
day one. There looks to be, pretty much over that ankle injury. He's looked no worse for the wear out there in
Mhm.
this game. And the fact of the matter is like Sean McDermott still doesn't necessarily have his biggest toy back in the lineup yet, and that's Von Miller. So there's a possibility that we could see even more
Mhm.
ascension from this defense and more aggressiveness as Von Miller makes his return here in a couple games. Um, and that's got to be very encouraging as well if you're a Bills fan to know that they've been able to do this without Von Miller. Obviously, the rest of the defense and has, the roster as a whole has
Mhm.
been very fortunate early in the season to be pretty healthy. But man, to think about what this could be with Von back in the mix too just gives me a lot of excitement.